If you're working with customers day in, day out, and you're still struggling to really know how to communicate and to engage and to excite them in a digital setting, then that's what I'm going to talk about today: how to communicate with customers in the digital world. Hey, welcome back to The Humble Pie. It's been a little while, and I'm really happy to be here again, speaking to you. A little bit of a change up in format from how we used to do it, but I feel compelled to want to share some things that I've been thinking about doing in my business and professional life, some of the practices that I've been putting into practice, and hopefully some lessons and some reading really that I've been looking at that I'd love to share with you and to just really talk about really to understand about how we're navigating this crazy world that we live in and the kinds of businesses that we build and the kinds of people that we are. So today I wanted to focus specifically on how we communicate or how to communicate with customers in a digital world. Now, a few qualifications on that. When I say customers, I mean any type of visitor, online user, a subscriber, perhaps a prospect, perhaps somebody who maybe hasn't bought a product or a service from you yet, but anyone who is engaging with you, anyone who makes up the wider audience, really. And so there are a couple things to really think about and to take note of when it comes to looking at how audiences behave and how they make decisions and how they educate themselves in the digital world versus maybe how they might have done. And as a result, how we as people who are either running businesses or as part of customer success teams, perhaps you're in sales or in marketing, or perhaps you're managing an account of a few different types of customers, and you're trying to really make sense of what this new world has to offer and what strategies you're able to bring in from that traditional customer engagement role, and certain things that you're going to have to just drop and relearn from scratch. Because when we talk about the digital world, it really is a different beast, right? And I mean digital world as in everything that happens online without it needing to be an in-person, a physical encounter. And more every day, that is just how things work. That is how the world is turning. So it's worth taking stock about the kinds of things that maybe we used to do as traditional sales, customer success people, founders, entrepreneurs, professionals trying to communicate with clients and users and subscribers, and what might have worked then and what maybe doesn't work so well anymore. And I also want to leave you with a couple sort of ideas or some things to put into practice about what the essential digital communication skills are going to be for the future and how you can get ahead of that curve in essentially putting that into practice right away. So the first, I suppose, big thing to think about and to take stock of is the fact that in this new world, in the way that audiences are educating themselves, taking in information, understanding things about their own behavior, about the things that they would like to either improve or challenges they'd like to solve, is that really they're not looking for products anymore or services or standalone packaged little neat things that they can buy from you. And essentially they pay $200 or $2,000 or whatever it might be, and they've got it, they put it in their cart and they go home happy. It doesn't work like that anymore, because inherently products are things that you can't customize, or at least can't customize too far. And the reason why that matters is because modern customers who are savvy, who are curious, who require more social proof, it's a different ballgame for them, because the sort of standard, or the bar, if you like, has really been set by the kinds of companies, the kinds of services who are willing to go further, to offer customized solutions, to change how they work so that they can be even more customer-centric. Now, customer-centric is also something that I think has become a bit of a perverse term, because anyone who sells a product is calling themselves customer-centric, but that really is anything but. That is a product-centric approach. right? It's not about the customer. It's about the product at the center of the universe, and then the customer comes to it. The big change in thinking here that we're trying to really unravel is the fact that the customer is at the center of the universe and the products need to be customized to them. It's a simple sort of, premise really, but it's something that I think has really not sunken in, especially with a lot of traditional business leaders, a lot of how many sales teams and marketing teams, customer success teams, product teams are envisioning their role in the customer's world and what that journey looks like. So the real big shift in mindset there is that a product is not a solution, and a customer, at least a digital customer, a new age customer, if you like, is really looking for a solution, something that helps them move their own goals or move their own agenda forward rather than simply depositing money into your bank account. So what does this mean for you, right? As a communicator, as somebody who now has to make sense of this world and still, for example, might have targets to deliver on, you might have certain things that you're needing to do, you want to still grow your business and make an impact and make a success of it. Your primary role now needs to shift away from simply being somebody who designs a product and hopefully flogs it to a willing audience. You now have to use a different set of skills to build an audience around a particular solution. And the way you do that is you move from selling that product to facilitating the sale of a solution through communicating what it is and what it does. So really what you're doing, instead of pitching or selling or trying to flog a product or a service, is you are having a conversation. That's really what it is. Think about that. You're having a conversation. And when you have a conversation, it's an entirely different experience, especially for the person who is, on the other side of that, being conversed with. It's a different experience because now there are questions being asked. There's a sense of affinity and relationship building that's required in order to do that. And so the objective of a conversation is not to sell a product. It's to understand the audience or the customer or that particular person, sometimes even at that person level, in many more dimensions, in a better way, so that whatever you also may have to sell them ultimately fits what they need. It fits the description. It also works well to determine whether that person is not a fit, right? And so that's why there's a sense of trust. There's a sense of credibility that needs to be built up, and that really only takes place in a conversation. Now, obviously, there are certain sort of exceptions to this, and so it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, but really what I'm trying to bring out here is the idea that the mindset shift from it being a one-way kind of energy flow from product to customer, shipping units. There's a two-way street. There's a two-way energy flow that needs to happen between you and your customer. And for all intents and purposes, we're calling that a conversation because ultimately there is an exchange of some sort. That's what interaction means. You are interacting back and forth between, one person and the next. And that requires a different level or a different set of communication skills in order to properly facilitate that, so that you can come off as credible. You can essentially build or earn trust. You are also in a position where you're able to offer a solution once that conversation has taken place or later in that conversation, so that it doesn't feel inauthentic or forced or contrived, or something that ultimately goes back to the habits of the old ways, which is essentially what we're really trying to escape from. So if you think about it like this, there's really an equation that I think sums this up beautifully, and I'd encourage you to write this down. Is trust equals credibility plus communication. So I'll say that again. The trust that you need, the bond, the essential bond that's required between you and your customer, is something that comes from credibility and communication put together. Now, the credibility can come from various different sources, and sometimes it comes from non-verbal sources, who you are, what you might have on your LinkedIn page or your website, what it says about you, your qualifications, your experience. It also comes from certain other inferences that somebody can pick up. For example, your body language, or the way your facial expressions move when you speak. Those sorts of things build up a kind of a psychological picture in the other person's mind when they're essentially assessing the level of trust that they should give to you. Now, the other side of the equation is about communication. So let's look at let's say the 5 areas really of essential communication skills, or affinities, if you like, habits, if you like, that I think go into making a very effective digital communicator, and ultimately somebody who is going to be really willing and able to grow a business through having conversations, having authentic conversations with clients, and allowing them to sell solutions that work. The first real kind of habit or skill set, if you like, is understanding and knowing your audience, knowing who you're speaking to and who you're speaking with. Now, this can be broken down into a couple kind of different areas, really, where it involves an element of researching. Perhaps that includes interviewing and crowdsourcing insights from others who are either like your audience and like the particular profile of who would normally consume your product or consume your solution. But really, it's about understanding their context through their own eyes. And there's a subtle difference here, which I think needs to really be understood, because if you are building up a picture of somebody who is your ideal audience, your addressable audience, it's essential for you to know the answers, or at least to know the questions to ask, that are really going to give you a good understanding of who they are, what the challenges are, what are the things that they need to make happen on their side in order for them to reach their goals. So it's really a strong empathetic exercise, this piece of knowing your audience well, because it builds that picture up not from your perspective, but from their perspective. And that's essential, because that gives you a real clue into the kind of mindset they're in when you approach them, when you have that conversation, and ultimately when you build that sense of trust and credibility with them. So knowing who they are, doing your research, asking questions, understanding their challenges in detail, and not just, to kind of get from A to B, not just to essentially, do the tango with them, and then at the end, hopefully they'll whip out the checkbook. It's not about doing it for the sake of doing it, but it's really about developing an understanding of who they are because you want to, because you have a solution that, if it fits, is going to transform something for the better in their lives. And the only way you know that that is going to hit the mark is if you know who they are. So it's, once again, pretty simple, but it's amazing how often people don't end up doing this, and don't end up putting in the time or bothering to put in some of the effort in really understanding some of the basics of who they are, who is the audience, and even at the individual level, who am I speaking to, who am I speaking with. The second area is kind of related it's totally related, because it now allows you to go out and employ those tools of learning how to know who your audience is, essentially. And that is all to do with listening and asking questions. Now, this really is a skill, and so often I find an undeveloped and completely underused skill, because without asking questions and without listening to the responses, you really don't allow yourself to get over a couple of fundamental problems, which are not knowing who they are without asking questions. Instead of, asking questions, you just jump into a pitch, or you might jump into, straight into, listing the benefits or the features of a product. Without asking questions, you don't have a chance to diagnose and understand the context from which they come. And you don't get to uncover whether or not they have a need, and whether or not certain hypotheses from your side are actually true. And so asking questions is really a skill because it allows you the kind of the real test to be made, to be put forward, so that they also have a sense of, well, this person's asking the right questions. They're bothering to listen to my responses. And that listening aspect is almost more important than the asking questions, because, and more important than the information that they give you, because it is in that unspoken sort of energy exchange, if you like, that is nonverbal, that becomes the building blocks for forming trust. That is why so many therapists, and the whole, essentially not just so many therapists, it's really the whole practice of psychology, really, and therapy, is not so much about the back and forth exchange of communication, what happened to you when you were young, what happened at this stage, and so on and so forth. But really, it's about the unspoken sort of subterranean level of trust that becomes solidified between those two people, because they're just talking and listening. There's something very magical and very special that happens, and it's the same in an audience building environment as well. So the kinds of questions that you can be asking to uncover these things really can be wide-ranging, but I tend to look at 3 types of main questions to help to build a conversation in the right direction, to allow trust to permeate and to also solidify between you and your audience. And I'll go into it very quickly. There are these 3 questions. Start off with a landscape question, which allows you to, just set the scene, ask them basic, open, nice, broad, wide questions to begin the journey of understanding what's going on in their context, and what are things like, what's the world according to you. Then beyond that, you look at asking a thread question. So after you've gotten a basic layout or a landscape of what things are like on their side, you're going to now go and pursue a thread. You're going to take a thread from what they've said, and now you're going to learn more about it. You're going to show some interest and enthusiasm in one particular direction. It doesn't always matter what that direction is, but it's about moving the conversation in a certain way so that A, there's no dead space or dead silence, but B, you're really kind of prodding in a certain direction in order to uncover not only what the challenge is that might be behind certain things in the landscape, but also to uncover the root cause of what those challenges are and where they come from. And then thirdly, you're able to ask an implication question, or a sort of a realization question. That's the word for it. And that is less about gathering information, but more about helping them realize the implication or the realization of what does all this information mean, right? You've told me about what the landscape is. You've gone into detail, into some specifics about certain challenges. Now you're going to pursue a thread and see where that goes and uncover that one a little bit more. And now I want to ask you a question about, cool, now, if these things don't get better, or something doesn't get fixed along the way, and you've just told me all of this, if all of that is true, what happens in the next 3 months? What happens to the team in 12 months? How will your customers react in 6 months' time if that isn't fixed? If this is a challenge that still persists and continues to grow in the way that it is infecting things in your organization? Now, there's many different versions of how to ask that, but there's a sort of a progression of questions that you can use to drive a conversation in a certain way, to build that trust, to really glean important information, but also to understand whether or not this is somebody who is ultimately going to be interested in a solution that you have, but ultimately also going to form part of the audience that you want to be building, right? And once again, that can only happen in a conversation context. And we're talking about these digital communication skills that we need in order to do that. So knowing your audience, asking questions and listening. A third one is embracing simplicity. Now, this is a huge one for me, and one that I'm a big fan of, if you like, because I'm a huge believer in the way you communicate, the way you design products, the way you envision a journey, the way you come up with a vision for your own business, how you think, how you write, how you explain yourself to people has to be as simple and brief and intelligible as possible. Now, once again, this is something that really not enough people do, which is why they've got to go out and either, explain themselves again or have to go into detail about why something might not make sense on the face of it, is because they're not able to explain it in a foolproof way that covers the bases, but also allows them to get a sense of, put it this way, you can appreciate complexity without you yourself being complicated. Now, there's an interesting nuance to that, because it means that if you can practice simplicity in the way that you speak to customers, in the way that you explain how your solution works, in the way that you even ask questions or how you think, and you try and look for the simplest way, the briefest, the shortest, the most elegant way to do that. So I really encourage you to be simple. Don't cloud things and overdo it with details and numbers and the kinds of things that are either going to bore people or put them off continuing to speak to you, or, kind of distract them from their journey with the kinds of things that aren't essential to what they need to know in order to move forward. There's a real kind of grace and an elegance in being simple and allowing the benefits to speak for themselves, if you like, and also for the space that gets created around being simple, so that a customer can help to, or an audience can really, inhabit that space that you create for them, instead of, peppering them with too much detail that ultimately probably isn't that necessary or isn't all that important. So simplicity as a skill, simplicity in knowing where to employ that kind of, simple way of looking at things, simple way of explaining, simple way of looking at the world, is, I think, really going to set a lot of people apart in the coming years when it comes to how to engage and interact and excite audiences in a purely digital context. The fourth one is really to do with visibility and energy. So this is a huge thing, because in, I hate that phrase, a post-COVID world, but, I suppose it does have some merit in describing, the way things are right now, where everything is virtual. We've kind of been, shuffled straight into this world where perhaps even, against our will. And we still have the need to impress and to create an impression and to have that conversation in the best possible way, but in the way that we might look or appear, sometimes even visually. In fact, often it's about how we might visually come off, is not going to carry through as well in a digital setting that you might have been able to get away with certain things in an in-person setting. And of course, there's examples to the contrary as well of how this works. But the real point I'm trying to make here is that if you can master the art of being able to generate and channel the kind of energy, especially visual energy, how you look, how you appear, how your body language appears, and how that then allows the audience to participate and to feel that energy and to really get involved in the conversation that you're having, that is going to be so absolutely essential in creating the rapport that needs to exist between you and your audience. You have to essentially be the energy that you want to see. You've got to, if you want to be able to, have the hype and the rah on a video call, or how you come off in a piece of video content, or perhaps when you're speaking to clients, on a review session, then you've got to be able to bring the energy you want in that session into the call, essentially, into that environment. It has to come from you. It can't be depended on from the audience's side, because firstly, they're the customers. You are the one who needs to set the tone. You got to set the bar for what the quality of the experience is going to be like. That has to come from you. So if you're able to channel that energy and get into the mindset and the sort of the enthusiastic space, if you like, of what that all looks like, then I think that's going to set you apart from how other people are going to build audiences. They're going to build it much more slowly. The energy and the level of enthusiasm is going to be lower, and it's going to tell on the bottom line. It's going to be something that I think makes a dramatic impact on the organization in the long run. And that brings me to the fifth and final sort of essential digital communication skill here, which is being able to be comfortable and work with the format that we have in the digital format. So once again, not only does this cover your body language, how you speak, how you address, your eye contact, those sorts of things, but it also covers your average level of comfort with setting an agenda, with how to handle the flow of information when you're speaking to someone in a digital setting during a conversation, how comfortable you are on video calls, on a podcast, and how you're able to use the elements of what I call digital storytelling to create that sense of rapport, to tell people what they need to know, to do it simply, to ask the right questions, to show empathy, to be able to radiate the level of energy that you'd like to see, and to also get what you need to know in order to know the audience in a better way. And so I have a course that covers all of this in a lot of detail in helping professionals, customer-facing professionals, to really get better at how they present and engage online audiences. It's called Digital Storytelling. There's a link in the show notes or in the description if you'd like to learn more about that. I'm really excited about it. I've had some really, really good responses so far as I've just recently launched it from students. So I'm very excited about that, and I know that it's something that brings a lot of value. So I really hope that this has been a useful little journey through what navigating the sort of digital world of communicating with audiences and customers is going to be like, and some of those elements that is worth paying attention to when it comes to improving the way that you build trust and credibility and how you communicate directly with clients, with audiences, with your users, with subscribers. So I really look forward to you jumping on the Humble Pie with me again. Thanks for joining, and we'll speak soon.